Hello, everyone.
Hey there, guys.
This is Amanda.
And this is Rita.
And you're listening to I Don't Know Her, the podcast where we talk about women you've probably never heard of, but
you should have.
And today you're going to find out some new information.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to just catch everybody up on a couple of things that Rita and I were up to this week. We were interviewed by our local community radio station, KYRS, which you can find online, by two hosts of the Art Hour.
It was very enjoyable.
It really was. It was a great conversation.
It was great.
And you can actually listen to that on Anchor. We posted it on our Facebook. And so if you're interested in hearing what we have to say about the process that goes into making our podcast, you can learn a whole lot more about us in that radio hour. And thank you to Eric and Mike for having us on the show.
They were a hoot.
They really
actually
were.
Went and had a couple beers with them afterwards, or wine, cider, and beer. And two really fascinating guys. Like I've known Mike for a long time, and he's a friend of my husband. And I found out a lot of things that I didn't know about him. Like I didn't even know he used to teach.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It turned out that her friend Mike and I had lots of connections in the teaching world, which was really cool.
Yeah, which is also the lovely thing about Spokane. A lot of people know each other.
It's true. And the longer you live here, the more you know everyone.
Absolutely.
So I told Rita that I had something I wanted to talk about today, but I didn't tell her what.
I am intrigued. What is it?
So let me just give you the context and why I was like, oh, I know exactly what I want to talk about today. So we have changed recording locations in my house.
Mm-hmm.
We used to record in what I called the recording room because it's all it was used for. But we have family coming to visit this summer, and we wanted to make sure everybody could be on the same floor, and that floor was where the full bathroom was.
Mm-hmm.
So we've switched things around, and now we're recording in, we call it the office, but it's really like an enclosed porch off of my bedroom. So Abby made this joke that was like, oh, well, now I can't just go up while you're recording and change and get naked and blah, blah, blah. And then we joked about how that would be weird. And then I remembered that I follow this writer. She writes for Autostraddle. Her name is Vanessa. She posted this thing on Twitter about how she is very fond of and encourages people to have group chats with their friends where they exchange naked selfies.
Really?
What do you think about that?
What is the purpose? Like, is it to reach each other more like on a more intimate level, or like?
I think, and she's specifically talking about queer people.
Okay.
So I think there's also that element of embracing what makes you unique. I think that there's something to be said about sharing something like that, like an intimate selfie, where it's not about sex.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, oh my God, look at how good my boobs look today.
Okay. Which I have commented on Amanda's boobs.
I mean, they do look good sometimes. Get the right bra on.
I don't know if like I would send it. I feel like maybe if I had a photo, I would share it. I don't feel okay with sending people information over digital information.
Is that a recent, or have you always felt that way?
I felt that way. I was one of those girls that was like, oh, I'm going to take a sexy photo of myself and send it to my boyfriend. And then we had a really bad breakup, and he has those photos. I don't know if he's done anything with them, but I just don't like that my image is out there in that way. And it was somebody I was in love with and somebody I trusted, who we broke up, and it was really messy. And so ever since then, I was just like, I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah, I did not share, not that I can recall anyway, very many intimate pictures until I met Abby, because we were long distance.
Oh, okay.
And she had a long-term relationship with another woman before. And that was like how they kept the spark alive, is they would send lots of nudie pics to each other. And so that was like my first time really doing that. And it was at first real weird. And then I got really into it.
Not to say that I wouldn't like to see those things, but of myself, I'd be a little timid to do it.
But think about how cool it would be if you did send a photo and everybody was like, oh my God, you look so hot. Oh my God.
Well, then I'd be like,
See, I think that's what it's about. I think it's about deepening your friendship with somebody,
oh,
sharing this kind of intimacy that you would normally have surrounding like weird sex stuff, but it doesn't have to be sexual.
maybe that's the thing is because I'm still thinking about it in a sexual way.
But I remember the first time, so Abby and I were pretty new when she moved to Montana to be with me. And I had this really great group of lesbian friends of queer women that we hung out with. And one night we all decided to go out to Bozeman Hot Springs. Or maybe it wasn't Bozeman Hot Springs. I can't remember. We went out to some hot springs and there was live music.
Fun.
It's this really cool place. And so we all got out there and we get to the locker room and everybody disrobes and puts on, their swimsuits. It's the middle of winter, by the way. It's like January. And I had sex with at least 2 of the girls in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am with my new girlfriend. And things just feel a little bit like, when you're new with somebody and you're like deeply in love with them, but you still don't know yet where like would they stray? You just don't know yet.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, because lesbians are notorious, especially young lesbians. They're fucking messy. And I was like, oh my God, what if she sees like that girl's tits and then is like, oh, see you later. I'm going to go over with her.
I get it. Yeah.
And also there was just something weird about like being naked with a whole bunch of women that everybody has sex with women. That was my first time ever doing that. Like in the past, I'd only ever, been in locker rooms with straight folks who I'm like, well, I get to do all the looking.
You get to do all the looking, but like when you're in that group, the group that you were in, like all the doors are open.
Yes. And I was with a group of women who most, I think a couple of them were pretty monogamous folks, but the rest were like up for anything. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. I feel a little insecure, like in my relationship. And, what are they, when they see her naked, like, it just felt weird. Like imagining these people knowing what my girlfriend and then potential wife and eventual wife, they know what she looks like naked.
Okay.
Think about that. Like, would it be weird for you if we were sitting here and I'm picturing Nick naked because I've seen him naked before?
Yeah, that'd be weird.
Right? There was just something a little bit like, even though now at 36, I'm like, oh, who gives a shit?
So, but
at 25, I was really insecure about all that shit.
There have been times where I have not had a problem getting naked in a group. Like I was on a trip with coworkers and I was naked in a hot tub. Yeah, but
you told me about that.
It was all dark and everyone's like, Rita's full on naked. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I wasn't bothered at the time.
See, I was so much of a prude about getting naked. I don't know exactly where that prudeness comes from because I was really open about talking about sex, about the kinds of things I liked, and I'm still not closed off about talking about sex and things like that. But actually having no clothes on for me is really, really like scary.
It's very vulnerable.
Yeah, it's scary to me.
It is. And it was funny because Abby was saying, I just can't get naked, or can I? Like, it might be weird for you, like looking at me. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm there in our friendship yet, is what I said.
And I was like, actually, I think it would be the weirdest for me. And I think it would be.
It would be. Well, I don't know.
So we're not going to exchange any naked selfies anytime soon? Is that what you're telling me? 40.
Give me another 5 years of friendship. Let's nail it. Stick a pin in it.
All right, we'll just put a pin in that, and then 4 years from now, I'm gonna be like
naked.
Hey, do you want my naked photo?
But can we take it now? Because I don't want a 40.
You're like, I'm not sure what it's gonna look like in 4 years.
Everything's still pointing up. So right now.
Oh, not me. Not anymore.
On that note,
I believe you're first.
Am I? Okay.
Yes.
Mine's a little short.
Okay.
So the woman that I'm going to be talking about today, her name is Elizabeth Brim.
How do you spell that last name?
Brim. Like
I don't know
like
her.
A brim of
like
a
a
cup.
brim of a hat?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know her.
She's a teacher. She's an innovator and a accomplished blacksmith.
Ooh.
Okay, so what sparked my interest in this, friend fact, I'm a big fan of this show. I don't know if you've heard of it, called Forged in Fire.
I think I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
It's awesome. It's on the History Channel. It's a competition, and there's 4 competitors, and 3 judges, and it's a competition in forging. So they give the people, like, the first thing is kind of, you get to make a weapon of your choice. So you can make a knife, you can make a sword, you can make, I think one time they made like katanas, things like that. And then they give you, like, what do you call it? Eliminate people, and it's down to 2 people, and then they assign them a weapon.
Okay.
So like, they'll be like, you have to make a broadsword. And these are like, you have to go back to your home forge. So these are forges that people have in their homes that they built themselves. They build the weapon, and then they test the strength, durability, density. So I'm super into this show.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah. So I was watching it, and they had their first ever female competitor on there. It's only been all men. And I
Oh.
thought to myself, I was like, it's like 2019. Why hasn't there been a fucking woman on there
It's
yet?
2020.
2020, sorry. And so they had a girl on there, and she was amazing. So it sparked my interest in, like, well, I wonder what women have made, done in blacksmithing. So I could not find information about Elizabeth till 1974, and she was born in 1951.
Okay, so
I don't even know her birthday.
like 24 years we're not sure on.
No, I do know that she was married for a brief time. She speaks very little of it, and it sounds like it was fairly messy, and it was a really hard breakup. I could tell on her face she just like didn't want to go there. So I don't know anything about what happened there. But she, like I said, she was born in 1951, and she grew up in Columbus, Georgia. In 1974, she graduated from Columbus College, which is now Columbus State University. She graduated with a BA in art, a minor in English literature. And in 1979, she earned an MFA in printmaking with minors in painting and in drawing.
Wow,
from
she
the
is
University of Georgia.
Creative.
Very. And I'm ashamed to say, what is an MFA?
It's a Master's of Fine Arts. That's what I have too.
I was going to say, Amanda spoke about her MFA the other day, and I was like, what's an MFA?
You should just well, I guess it was probably in front of Mike and Eric, wasn't it?
It was, and I didn't want to admit I didn't know what it was, but that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, Master's of Fine Arts.
Yeah, because my brother has one, and I was like, I believed that that's what he had.
Yeah. Mine's in poetry.
Mm. So after graduate school, she moved back home to Columbus after her divorce. The head of the art department at Columbus College told Elizabeth, why don't you go to Penland School of Crafts and learn how to do ceramics? That way, when you come back, you can be our pottery and ceramics teacher. So she jumped at the chance at being a teacher. She went to Penland, which is located in North Carolina, to do ceramics. After finishing an intensive 8-week summer course at Penland, Elizabeth became the ceramics professor at Columbus College. So shortly after that, she became slightly interested in metals and took a 2-week jewelry course at Penland. And she quickly noticed that a lot of the metalworking courses was like, it was all men. She was the only woman. And when she went to Penland, she kind of accepted the challenge of like, there's not any room for me here. She felt a little intimidated, and that this is something that she felt like she wanted to push herself a little bit, especially after her bad breakup. So after taking this course, it sparked what turned into a lifelong devotion to metalworking. She first focused on non-ferrous metals, which I was like, what kind of metals are those? Those are metals that actually have no iron. So like aluminum, copper, nickel, tin, and like fairly pliable. You're not going to need to do like all the forging and hammering and like kind of the more intense stuff.
Yeah, the harder work.
The harder work. She was quickly introduced to blacksmithing during a small metals class at Penland by a blacksmith named Gary Nofke. It was during this class that the students were asked to repair iron tools. So Gary took her to where the blacksmith workshop was to repair some tools. And she actually said to herself, I like this, is what she said in her head. She ended up abandoning her jewelry class for the day and working on making her own iron tools. She struggled with her first tool, which was a hammer, pretty badly. She showed up, I think it said 8 a.m. or something, 9 a.m. to make this hammer. She was there till 10:30 at night.
Ooh.
And her fire kept dying. Her metal wasn't bending. It wasn't doing what she wanted. And she was struggling, and she was seeing like these men watching her. And they were finishing up, and one would leave and another would leave and another would leave. And she saw them succeeding. And she thought to herself, like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
She's like, maybe I should just go back to what I was doing, which was easier. So she had that moment of self-doubt. She ended up finishing her hammer, though, and it worked. And she still actually uses it till this day.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is really cool.
I think it'd be just cool to have something that I made be a household useful tool every day. Like, that's a cool idea.
Especially something that symbolizes a step in your growth, I think. So after getting over that really bad hump, she decided to sign up for the blacksmithing class at Penland. And she studied under an instructor named Doug Wilson and another one named Peter Hapney. This is a quote from her. Upon signing up for class, I called my mother, and I told her I was excited I would be taking a blacksmithing class. She got really quiet on the other end of the phone, and she said, Elizabeth, I have to tell you that I don't approve of that. Blacksmithing is not a ladylike thing to do.
Remind me again about what year this is.
This is 70s. It's her mom.
It doesn't matter. It'd probably be said today in 2020.
No. She was actually fairly upset at her mother's comment.
Yeah.
Because she was excited. She was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And then her mom poo-poos it. So she says, I told a jeweler friend of mine, Tom McCarthy, what my mother had said. And he answered, oh, just wear a string of pearls and you'll be ladylike.
I love that answer.
So she started doing that.
Really?
As a joke. Like, she wore a string of pearls, and then she's been like notorious for wearing pearls while doing her work.
You know what? I love that.
I do too.
I think that's really funny and cheeky.
So she's known throughout the field with her trademark pearls. She's also known for using really feminine imagery in her work. One of her first iconic pieces that she forged was a pair of steel stilettos in 1988.
Steel stilettos?
Yes.
First off, those things would be so fucking heavy. Nobody would ever actually wear them.
She said they're wearable, but don't do it.
Yeah. Can you imagine? You'd just be like dragging, there'd be sparks following you as you walked.
So she said that it was inspired by the fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses.
I don't think I there's like a vague recollection of that from like my English days, but I don't remember.
I have a really, really vague memory as well. But I'm going to play a clip for you where Elizabeth talks about this inspiration.
You're using something hard and inflexible to make something that's presumably delicate and malleable. Why?
I think I just kind of fell into it. And at one point I was thinking about that fairy tale, the 12 Dancing Princesses, where they would get out of the castle every night and dance their shoes into tatters.
They could tell from the worn slippers, the shoes that they'd been out partying.
And so I thought, well, if I made indestructible shoes, those princesses could party forever.
So you got a little glimpse of Elizabeth.
Yeah, first off, not what I expected.
What were you expecting?
I guess this is going to reveal my own biases. I guess I was picturing her to be a little butcher.
Really?
Yeah, but she's like,
Very
like
petite.
she's pretty small, has her hair, like long hair, but it's pulled back into a bun. She has, like cute little glasses.
She's got her pearls.
And has her pearls on over like a blue sweater. And best of all, as you probably heard in the clip, she's talking with Anthony Bourdain, who I love and adore. And I love that it has a connection to Eugene Brazier, who we talked about last week.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because Anthony Bourdain was like one of the people who was like, hey, dudes, you cannot forget her.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he looked up to her and had studied her.
Nice. Well, this is so the clip that I featured is from a project that Anthony did called Raw Craft.
I'd never even heard of that, but I'm
I
looking
did
on the
not.
side of the thing and I'm seeing that there's a whole bunch of these episodes.
It is a series, and so definitely check it out. They're really short. They're about 15, 20 minutes, easy. They're all
Perfect.
available on YouTube. And I love that story, though, that
Yeah.
Elizabeth's mind goes there. She's like, that these ladies can party forever.
Yeah, I wanted to make it so they could party forever. That's brilliant.
So the pair of shoes that Elizabeth made went on to win first prize in 1988 at the Abana. It's a Southeastern Regional Conference, which is a blacksmithing conference in Madison, Georgia. She continued to craft narrative feminine forms, such as like she would do like aprons, tiaras, corsets, and frilly pillows. The pillow is where she was innovative in the craft. She said she was out having beers with some friends one night, and they were talking about forging. And she came up with the idea to take 2 pieces of flat forged metal while they're red hot, and then add air to them to see if they would expand and blow up. So she tried this with like an air compressor, which is a pretty quick shot of air, and it worked. So it blew up almost like it looks like a little Tostino's hot pocket. Like in that
Hot
way.
pocket.
And she was trying, yeah.
I
She
can't
was- You
not
can't
do it.
not do that.
It is impossible.
So she ended up creating these pillows because she said she wanted to put her tiaras on something. Because when a tiara is presented, it's got a little pillow.
The crown is on a little pillow.
Yeah. So trying this process, it had never been done before, and it worked. So after taking many more classes, she became like super involved in the iron studio at Penland. And at the time where she was attending these classes, the trade and actually the numbers of attendants were dwindling. So she decided to organize the first blacksmithing symposium in 1989. And by doing this, Elizabeth was single-handedly credited for saving the blacksmithing program that's there today.
Oh, well, that's really cool.
Yeah. She went on to run the studio from 1995 to 2000. This is a quote from Elizabeth. I grew up in a strong female-dominated society. My mother and grandmother made frilly dresses for my sister and me, and Mama told us fairy tales. In my own way, I'm continuing that tradition.
Mm-hmm.
The things I make are all about being female and the expectations of Southern women in my generation. I'm just playing dress up, making a little fun of myself, and I'm having a really good time.
I love that outlook.
I do too. It's just like these super feminine things made out of this fire and iron.
Yeah, that's really
Beautiful.
it's also fascinating. It's like that perfect thing that happens sometimes in fashion where you have hard meets soft.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that that's what she's doing basically with her art. And I would call that art.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it's obviously not like you're not going to carry around that pillow. You're not going to lay on it.
So Elizabeth was a very active blacksmithing instructor and exhibiting artist. I said it.
She did it, everybody.
I was going to take the word out, and I was like, no, fuck it. I'm going to say it.
I'm going to do it right this time.
In addition to teaching at Penland, she taught at Peters Valley Craft Center in New Jersey, and she was invited to teach at Haystack School of Crafts in Maine. She's also taught workshops all over the country, teaching at the Society of North American Goldsmiths annual conference, and she regularly shows her work at universities, at museums, and in galleries. In 2010, she was invited to participate in a pivotal exhibition called Iron, Forged, Tempered, Quenched at the Houston Center of Contemporary Craft in Houston, Texas. She was specifically invited because of her innovative techniques, her voice as an artist, and her role as a female pioneer in a male-dominated field. The Metal Museum where she was invited went on to choose Elizabeth as their 2009 Master Metalsmith.
Is that the first time a woman has been named that?
I don't know. That might be something kind of interesting to look up.
Yeah.
Her exhibit was called Excess. And it was the Master Metalsmith where she won her award. That's what her exhibit was called. and it was one of her inflated steel pillows and included a new technique involving etching and then forging and then welding, which had never been done before.
What did she etch?
She etched the actual pillow.
But what, like just with designs?
The design was almost like a filigree of like spirals and flowers and things like that. So she's like etching it while it's hot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder how you do that.
I don't know. I'm going to include another clip from this awesome interview just to hear what she says in this clip, and her face actually brought me to tears.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, I'm prepared. Or maybe I'm not.
So I hear you love Tupac.
Uh-huh.
Why Tupac?
There's a Tupac quote. He goes, "I'm so harsh because I'm so soft," or something to that effect. So some of his songs, like Dear Mama and Brenda's Got a Baby, you know those? They're very sensitive. And then he's got the other ones, like really, really mean ones, when he and Biggie were quarreling. But I just think I think people who are very, very sensitive a lot of times have to cover that with a hard facade. And I would love to aspire to that. I'm very sentimental. I'm very, very compassionate. And I wish I could be a thug.
Isn't that amazing?
I wish I could be a thug.
I wish I could be a thug. And just her, you can see the catch in her voice.
Oh, yeah.
When she's talking about being sensitive. And I feel very much that person. Mm-hmm. And I could connect with her on that because, especially with the art that she's making of these feminine, the feminine imagery, but made out of this rough material, I think is a perfect narrative for women.
You know, what she does reminds me of the time that Abby and I went to the mattress factory in Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I first became introduced to Yayoi Kusama. But in that same installation, the museum was inside of this old mattress factory, hence the name. But they also owned this old house next door. And it was like a 3-story craftsman house, very similar to the old house that I used to live in. And you walked in the front door and there was like a girl sitting at a little desk and she would, check your wristband or your ticket or whatever.
Okay.
And then the installation began and you would see these black strings start to crawl up the stairwell. So you would follow them, and the farther up the stairwell you got, the more string there was. And then suddenly it was completely covered and it was these webs of string. And you would go into each room and the artist would have staged the room to represent some kind of part of family life or home life.
Okay.
And a lot of them ended up being critiques of expectations of women. Like one room had this beautiful wedding gown suspended inside the web.
Ooh.
And it was just profound. And it was just like one of those things where like, there's so much tied around the image of a wedding dress. And I think that's what she's doing too. There's so much tied to the imagery and symbolism of a single high heel. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I think of a high heel on a pillow, I think of Cinderella.
Okay.
And that search for the glass, like who fits the glass slipper.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like what she does in terms of taking these things that we all have really strong, sometimes unconscious and subconscious connections to, that they mean stuff to us. And then when we have to examine them from a different perspective, they stop having that same meaning.
I feel too, and I'll share some images of her art. It's just the weight of it. And I feel like the weight that women put on their shoulders of these things. There's one she did of a camisole that's hanging on a hanger. And just like the weight and how heavy it looked of something that we wear that's so delicate.
Oh, I love that too.
It was just, I'm fascinated with this lady. I wish I could be a thug. I love Anthony. So I hear you like Tupac.
Oh, I know. I was like, where is this going? I mean, just to see this like old gray-haired white lady not just like talk about liking Tupac, but like eloquently describing lyrics and the whole like persona and the history. I mean, I was like, what?
Where did you come from? So following her master metalsmith display called Excess, she actually donated the piece to the museum, which I think is lovely. It's currently on display, it was currently on display this year or last year, in March 2019, as part of a series called Crafting a Legacy, 40 Years of Collecting and Showing the Metal Museum. Elizabeth is currently still forging. She's still teaching at Penland, and she has a display going on at the moment called Appalachia Now, an interdisciplinary survey of contemporary art in Southern Appalachia.
Where is that at?
That is going to be, I believe it's in Ohio.
Interesting. Okay.
So I got most of my information from a bio written by Brooke Garcia for the Metal Museum, an interview with Elizabeth Brim by Andy Jewell, Wikipedia, South Writ Large, Stories, Arts, and Ideas from the Global South. She has a website called elizabethbrim.com where you can see a lot of her work and some photos of her. And from the YouTube interview with Anthony Bourdain, and again, that series is called Raw Craft.
That Raw Craft series is right up my alley. I'm definitely going to check that out later.
Yeah.
I really liked her story. I liked the conversation that we could have. I mean, when we finish recording, I'm still going to want to talk about her art.
Yeah.
I know it.
And I love the idea of her putting up the mirror to women and really take a look at these things that we check mark as feminine.
Well, and I can't help but think that her decision or motivation maybe to explore femininity in her metalworking was probably instigated because of that comment her mother made.
Yeah. And actually, Anthony Bourdain asked her, like, is your mother proud of you now? She's like, oh, yeah, she's real proud of me now. It's like, because she's successful.
She's successful at it.
Yeah. Just a reminder, it's like, don't buy the bullshit. You know, people who make you doubt yourself, just keep going.
Truly. I mentioned that the other night when we were talking with Eric and Mike, that my mother has never read a single thing I've ever written.
Yeah.
It's just not, she doesn't care, and it's not her thing. So she told me more than once that I didn't turn out to be the daughter she wanted.
Oh.
So, you know, but then you have to figure out, am I the person I want to be? Because if I can say yes to that, then I feel okay.
I believe my mother told me something, not necessarily in those words, but she told me something similar. And then I said, you know what? Well, you're not the mom that I needed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, I'm not the daughter you wanted, and you're not the mother I needed. And need is more than want.
Okay, skirting past that dicey stuff. What do you got, Amanda? All right.
You ready?
I'm ready.
So, just as a preface, this particular story has been told by like countless podcasts. And so I had been reticent to tell her story, even though I find her fascinating, because I already knew it. And I was like, there are going to be so many people who already know it. But I was like, but still, I want to talk about it.
Okay.
Are you ready? I'm talking about Kate Warne.
I don't know her.
She was the first female detective in the United States.
What?
You don't know her story?
No.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully there are some listeners who also haven't heard her story. So Kate Warne was born in upstate Erin, New York in 1830 or 1833.
Okay.
Shrug emoji. And,
hey, but we don't know Our Lady's birthdays.
Oh, there's more in common with that beginning part too, because there's almost nothing known about her early life until she's 23.
Really?
Yeah.
So the same thing. Yeah.
So she possibly came from a family of, quote, modest means and had a limited education. And she was perhaps, again, these are like speculations, perhaps interested in a career in acting, but her family was opposed to that idea. Remember Laura Keene?
Yeah.
And everybody's like, that's not ladylike
Acting is
work.
for sinners.
So there's also the idea that she possibly married quite young and described herself as a widow, that her husband had died in a fatal accident.
Okay.
And this is at age 23.
Wow. It's really young.
And this is when her life takes a decidedly unusual turn for a woman. And this is where we end up learning a little bit more about her.
Okay.
So at age 23, it is 1856. Alan Pinkerton placed an ad in the Chicago newspaper looking for new detectives to join the Pinkerton Detective Agency, which he owned and operated with an investment partner and his brother. Alan Pinkerton was a Scottish immigrant who had been a detective and spy in his native country before moving to the U.S.
Whoa.
He also served as a deputy sheriff and a police officer in Chicago before setting out to have his own agency. At the time of the founding of his detective agency, the United States did not have specific investigative units in law enforcement.
Okay.
It was almost all done by private contractors or citizens.
Did they have a law enforcement? They had sheriffs and stuff? Okay.
And sheriffs would do things like break up bar fights and
Sheriffy things.
yeah, and like it just wasn't investigative work.
Okay.
The kind that we think of now that police are supposed to do. That's not really what they did. So instead, they would have these private agencies like the Pinkertons who would come in and they would do investigative work. And they would be hired by private companies, private individuals, things like that. Much like how private investigators work now.
Okay.
But it wouldn't just be, it would also be companies and things like that that would hire these guys. So the Pinkerton agency at the time was pretty renowned as one of the best, if not the best in the country. So Kate Warne, a 23-year-old widow, supposedly, walked into the Pinkerton Detective Agency to answer the ad for investigators.
Ooh, was she turned away?
Well, Alan is like, he sees her and he goes, "Oh, you're here to be a secretary."
Oh, no.
And he's like, we don't have any need for any more clerical work. Like, sorry, good luck in your next venture. And she was like, no, I am here because you put an ad in the paper for detectives.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really like, that's not what we do here. We don't hire women.
Ooh.
And so she was like, well, hear me out. So she made like a really strong case as to why he should hire her to be a female detective. And here are some of the things that she told him. She said that a woman would be able to do things that men cannot do. For example, a woman would be able to befriend the wives and girlfriends of suspected criminals and gain their confidence and perhaps then get to know what really happened.
Yeah.
She further told him that women have a distinct eye for detail and that they notice things men don't notice.
Hell yeah.
Right? And that women are keen observers.
Very. We watching all that shit.
Mm-hmm. We're watching every single move you make, every single yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Kate also noted that men often reveal secrets in the company of women. Even if they're just talking to each other, but the wives happen to be in the room, they'll reveal secrets in front of women. And she said, they don't think women are going to do anything with those secrets.
Or that they're listening.
And so I might as well be the one listening. And women at the time, just FYI, women were not allowed to work in law enforcement at this time. And in fact, the first female police officer in the United States wouldn't be hired until 1910, more than 50 years later.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And when women were hired as police officers in the early 20th century, they weren't allowed to carry weapons. And they were also only allowed to work on cases that were, quote, women's and children's issues.
Okay.
So it would have been really strange for a woman to be hired to be a detective. And especially at this particular agency, which had a really good reputation.
Mm-hmm.
So Alan was like, I'm not so sure. But he was really impressed with her reasoning. And he said that she had showed that she had evidently given the matter much study. And he was just impressed. He was like, you did your homework. You thought about a really good argument. I'm convinced. Let's try it.
Okay.
So Pinkerton hired Kate Warne after it took 2 days of her coming up with more and more arguments.
Don't take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm. And that made her the first female detective in the country. And almost immediately, she proved her worth. So she was hired in 1856, and she worked on small cases for those first 2 years. But in 1858, the Pinkerton Detective Agency was hired by the Adams Express Company, apparently a mutual funds company that still exists.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And they hired the Pinkerton Agency to investigate what they believed was a series of very serious embezzlements. In fact, again, this is 1858. More than $50,000 had been stolen from the company.
Oh, whoa. That's a lot of money.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be in the millions, maybe billions. Now.
I mean, well, definitely it would probably be like $1 million. And the agency suspected a man named Nathan Maroney. They said that he was the manager of their Montgomery, Alabama office. And they believed he was the last employee to have seen the money before it disappeared. But they had no way to prove it. Think about 1858. How would you prove anything?
No. And everything's probably hand ledgered too. You could manipulate anything.
Yeah, you could forge anything.
Yeah.
You could pay off people to lie for you.
Yeah.
So Kate was sent to Montgomery to see if she could suss out the truth. And she took on the persona of a Southern woman of high society and quickly got in the good graces of Mrs. Maroney, the suspect's wife. After weeks of gaining the wife's confidence, Mrs. Maroney not only revealed that her husband had in fact been the thief, she actually led Kate to the hidden store of cash in Pennsylvania.
No.
And Kate was able to secure the husband's conviction and returned $39,515 to the Adams Express Company.
Wow.
Right? So she was like already like getting
good cases.
So the work she had done on this high-profile case convinced Alan Pinkerton that not only was Kate excellent at her job, but that there was clearly a place for women in general in investigative work.
That's awesome.
Which is really cool. Like just the idea that this one woman has now opened doors for other women.
Mm-hmm.
So Alan actually set up a new bureau in his agency, the Female Detective Bureau, and he put Kate Warne in charge of it. So within a year, Kate would be faced, though, with the most important case of her career. Now, this is why a lot of people know who she is.
Okay.
So in 1861, the Pinkerton Detective Agency was hired by Samuel H. Felton, the president of the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad. Felton was hearing rumors that secessionists were planning potential sabotage of the railroads. And at the time, you might have heard the country was quite divided over slavery. And Abraham Lincoln had just been elected. So he was currently the president-elect, and he was about to be inaugurated. And he campaigned on abolishing slavery. So his win really stoked the divisions between abolitionists and the so-called secessionists. So Allen went to Baltimore to investigate these railroad sabotage plots. And what he found was that there wasn't just a plot to destroy the railroad. They were planning an assassination.
Oh.
President-elect Abraham Lincoln had publicized his plan to go on a 70-city tour leading up to his inauguration. So when he was moving from his hometown to Washington, D.C., he was hitting 70 different towns and cities along the way to sort of like talk to people leading up to his inauguration because the country was completely divided.
Yeah.
So he was trying to find a way to like talk to the people.
Mm-hmm.
The only major city on his route that was still a stronghold of slavery was Baltimore.
Really?
Isn't that?
Yeah. I was like, Baltimore?
Yeah. Which is, it is interesting. Maryland, I just never think of as the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really, really heavily a secessionist city, stronghold of slavery.
Wow. Okay.
So Allen got permission to further his investigation, and he brought in Kate to infiltrate the secessionists because she'd done such a good job.
Yeah.
Infiltrating Southern society. And, you know, I think this is why people think she'd wanted to be an actress because she was really good at it.
I like it.
So perhaps she'd wanted to be an actress and thought, well, I'll just use my acting skills in a different way because she really did become an actress.
Yeah.
So Kate disguised herself as a rich Southern belle visiting Baltimore. And she took on a Southern accent. She dressed exactly the way Southern women had dressed.
Oh, it sounds like so much fun.
Right? And she even put on a thing I'd never heard of before called a cockade.
Huh?
Okay, I was like, do other people know who this is? So a cockade was this ribbon that was usually gathered into a kind of rosette.
Okay.
And in the days before the Civil War, it was an outward indication of you supporting the Southern cause.
So I was going to say, is it worn on your chest?
Women wore it either on their chest or on their hats.
I have seen the imagery, but I didn't know that that's what it represented.
Yeah, and I guess the Southern one was black, white, and red.
Okay.
And I actually looked at a picture of one from a Confederate museum. So that it was a sign, like an outward sign that you supported the cause of the South. And ladies, again, would wear them on their chests or on their hats and accompany men to these soirees. So Kate became known to some as Mrs. Cherry and to others as Mrs. M. Barley or MB. And she was able to successfully infiltrate these Baltimore secessionists.
Wow.
She not only learned that there was, in fact, a plot to assassinate Lincoln, she was able to learn the specific details of the plot.
Who are these people that are talking?
Well, think about it. Think about all these men would gather at like one of their houses and they'd bring their wives and the wives would all get together and chat too, but probably in the same room. And then they could listen in on what the plan was.
Wow.
So that's basically what happened. So according to Kate, the plan was concocted by an Italian named Cipriano Ferrandini. And the plan was to ambush Lincoln as he transferred trains in Baltimore. So there's this really interesting situation with the trains. Anytime you wanted to go to D.C., you had to switch trains in Baltimore.
Okay.
And the issue is that the northbound trains and the southbound trains were located a mile apart. So once you got off one, you had to travel a mile across the city to get to the other one.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't a great setup. But that's where the exchange would happen between the North and the South.
Okay.
It was in Baltimore. So what the plan is that as he's transferring those trains in Baltimore, that they would ambush him. And what they were going to do is stage some kind of diversion, like a fight, a brawl, that would attract the few police officers that were there to kind of break up that fight. And then the others would be able to ambush whatever carriage or whatever he was in and assassinate him.
Okay.
They even held a meeting in which the men drew ballots to see who was going to be assigned the assassinator.
That's one way to do it.
And this guy, Ferrandini, who was kind of the head of the plot, he was really clever. He was like, they had them do it in the dark so that nobody knew who got the red ballots until they left the room and they couldn't tell anybody what ballot they got.
Okay.
So the red ballots were the assassin ballots, but he actually planted multiple red ballots because he wanted the plan to be fail-proof.
Oh, geez.
If there was one guy who was supposed to be the assassin and he got interrupted, then the plan wouldn't go through.
Mm-hmm.
So if there were like 5 or 6 of them, they would all be geared towards this one goal and would be more likely they would get it done.
Jeez, that's aggressive.
Yeah, and also really underhanded. So Allen immediately went to President Lincoln with the information and he urged the president to skip President-elect, he was on his way to his inauguration.
Mm-hmm.
So Allen was like, you got to skip Baltimore, go directly from Pennsylvania to D.C., find a different route.
Okay.
Don't take the train. But Lincoln was like, I don't even think this is real.
Oh, no.
I think this is fiction. I don't think this is real. But then a second independent source confirmed the existence of this plot. It happened to be the son of the guy Lincoln had chosen to be his Secretary of State.
Oh, okay.
So he was like,
oh shit.
Oh, this is real. Okay. So that's when he's like, oh, maybe I'll change my plans. However, he refused to change his actual plan stop because the whole reason he had to go to Baltimore is he was going to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And he was going to do this like thing, like this speech, and he was going to present this flag and whatever. And so he was like, no, I'm not missing this.
Okay.
And so they were like, okay, well, he refuses to change his route. So we're going to have to change the time. Because again, the whole thing had been publicized. So it was in the papers what time he would be going through Baltimore. And so people could come and see him and wave him on and blah, blah, blah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided, okay, if he's not going to change his route, we're going to change the time. So what happened is the night before at 5:45 in the middle of dinner, his personal secretary comes in and says, oh, Mr. Lincoln, you need to leave. So then that's when he leaves. But here's the major question. Okay. So let's say we move him to an earlier time. We've all seen pictures and heard stories about what President Lincoln looked like.
Yeah.
He was a little bit difficult to disguise.
Yeah. He was really tall and he had a very, very iconic face. Yeah.
And he wore a beard, something that like was kind of weird at the time. So what they did is he changed into a traveling suit and a soft felt cap instead of his traditional stovepipe hat. And then they placed a shawl around his shoulders and he hunched his back.
Oh my God. It's the worst disguise ever.
No,
You're about to get murdered. I'm going to put on a traveling suit.
Well, what happened was he gets to the station or whatever, and Kate's like, oh, my brother, it's so good to see you. I'm so excited to travel with you.
Oh.
And she puts her arm around him like he's this like elderly, sick brother of hers. And so when she gets him onto the train, she's like, okay, everybody, this is my elderly, sick brother. We're very wealthy. And he needs his own sleeper car. Everybody needs to get away. He's very sick also. He'll kill you. And so everyone clears the fuck out and he gets his own sleeper car by himself.
Wow.
And again, they're traveling in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So they get into the sleeper car. Things are going pretty well. She, though, is terrified, as you would be, right?
Yeah.
She knows that there are multiple people out to kill this man.
Yeah.
And it's on her. She's the only one that can stop them. So she has a pistol inside of her dress. And she is in the sleeper car with him and watches him sleep and doesn't close her eyes for a single second.
Whoa.
And they get to Baltimore. Things went pretty well, pretty smooth. She's terrified, but it's gone well. Then they get to Baltimore, and there's a noise ordinance that says you can't use, normally when you travel during the day, because those train stations are a mile apart, there's a little like commuter train that would take you between the two.
Did they have to walk?
They had to go, the carriage that they were in had to be pulled by horse.
Oh, jeez.
Which obviously took a really fucking long time.
Yeah.
So they're going through Baltimore with basically a hunted man in the middle of the night by horse, and it's taking forever. But they were able to escape unharmed, and he went on to D.C. and was inaugurated as president of the United States. And if it weren't for her, it maybe wouldn't have.
Wow.
So that Baltimore plot was completely foiled. And this, because I told you she didn't sleep at all in the car.
Yeah.
So this work and her vigilance gained not only the Pinkerton Agency this incredible distinction of having protected the president, i.e. the Secret Service, but it also created their slogan, which is, "We never sleep."
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was accompanied with an open eye as their logo, and it was a woman's eye.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So shortly after Lincoln's inauguration, obviously we all know that the Civil War broke out. Mm-hmm. And Pinkerton himself was an abolitionist, long time. In fact, when he moved from Scotland to the United States, he immediately opened up his house as a spot on the Underground Railroad.
Wow.
So he decided that the agency should do something to help the Union fight the war. So he wrote to Lincoln offering his services, but Lincoln's general had already planned on asking the Pinkertons to be involved. So they immediately, instead of working for the president, which would be, protecting the president or whatever, he started working for the general as part of an extension of the military. And this meant that the Pinkerton Agency became the first military intelligence agency. They set up headquarters in Cincinnati, and they were doing all kinds of undercover espionage operations so that the Union soldiers and generals and stuff could plan what they were doing based on the information they were getting from the Pinkerton detectives.
I had no idea about all of this.
And here's what's really cool. Kate wasn't the only woman.
Oh.
Because by this point, they had a whole set of female detectives, and she had been in charge of like head detective or whatever of the bureau.
Mm-hmm.
He actually promoted her to the female superintendent of detectives.
Wow.
And what they did ended up being the blueprint for what later would become the Secret Service and the CIA.
Oh, jeez.
And so she was obviously planted in the South because that's where she could really put on a show.
Mm-hmm.
And again, she was charming her way into Southern society and learning what they were doing and where they were going and what kinds of stuff was happening. And she was in charge of a whole gaggle of female detectives who were doing the same work, which is pretty great.
That is really cool.
And throughout the war, she passed on information that helped the Union win. So she won, basically. After the war, Kate worked on a number of high-profile important cases. I'm going to highlight a couple of them because they're great. It's like a movie. I want to see this movie.
Okay.
So one such case was the murder of a bank teller, and it was pretty gruesome. His name was George Gordon, and the murderer or murderers knew that he would be carrying a large amount of cash.
Mm-hmm.
And so they followed him and struck him in the head with a hammer.
Ugh.
And stole $130,000.
It's a shit ton of money.
Oh, I know. I'm like, oh my God, $130,000 right now would change my life. The prime suspect in the case was a man named Alexander P. Drysdale, but they didn't have enough evidence to connect him to the murder or to the theft. They didn't have any information about the money. There was no evidence of the money. They didn't have things like fingerprints then. There was no witnesses because it was in the middle of the night. He was hit in the back of the head. They had nothing. So obviously the only way to ever figure out if he was the one to do it is they had to get some kind of confession.
Mm-hmm.
So they put Kate in charge. So Kate Warne went undercover as Mrs. Potter, and she befriended Mrs. Drysdale. And just like the case of the Adams Express Company, she was able to gain the confidence of his wife, Mrs. Drysdale, who eventually confessed and told them the location of the hidden cash.
Oh. So she killed him? Or
No, she just knew of everything.
She knew. Okay.
Just like we talked about, like these men would tell their wives everything. And then the wives would be like, I guess I have all the information.
Yeah.
My favorite case that Kate worked on was a foiled murder plot. This is like serious PI work. A man named Captain Sumner, he was a sea captain, he came to the Pinkerton Agency with suspicions that he believed his sister and her lover were planning on killing him.
Ooh.
So Kate interrogated Captain Sumner, and again, the captain that's hiring them, she was like, I need to know everything. I need to know, when were you born? Where did you grow up? What was her favorite dog? What would she do? Blah, blah, blah. And she just peppered him with all of these questions. And he was like, what the fuck? I'm not the one who's doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't understand. So she learned all she could about his sister Annie and her lover, Mr. Patmore. And so after feeling like she had sufficient information regarding their lives, Kate went undercover as Lucille, a fortune teller.
This is a movie, yes.
So Annie was kind of one of these people who was really interested in fortune. So she befriends this Annie character and is like, I can tell you your fortune. So over a couple of sessions where Kate, as Lucille, is able to tell this woman all of this really intimate information about her life that there's no way Lucille would ever know. Annie's like, oh my God, she's the real deal. I have to see if she can figure out, like, how will we get out of this without getting caught?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, she tells Kate everything. And she not only revealed that they were, in fact, planning to kill her brother, but that her lover, Mr. Patmore, had previously already killed his wife.
What? Oh my gosh.
So they all went down, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that great? I love that. That's like
Not for the wife, but
that actual story, I believe it was that one I read somewhere, was happened to be one of the things that Sherlock Holmes ended up writing about.
Oh, wow.
Like he fictionalized the story.
Yeah.
So over the time that she worked for the agency, Kate assumed dozens of aliases, and she often actually went by variations of her own name. So she was sometimes known as Kay, Kate, Kitty, Katie. Her last name was Warne, or Warren. And sometimes it would be without the E, sometimes two. I mean, it's just all kinds of... And she was a really successful detective, but unfortunately her star would not continue to rise. At just 35 years old, she contracted a lung infection and died of pneumonia on January 28th, 1868.
Wow.
Yeah, 35.
I'm 35.
I know. Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
Alan Pinkerton was by her side and arranged for her to be buried in his family plot in Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, where a number of other Pinkerton detectives were buried. The ones that he felt like were his loyal, great detectives. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the moment where I'm going to say that there were a lot of people who believed that they were having an affair, that she was his mistress. Ooh. And often when they would travel to the South or whatever and work cases, she would pose as his wife.
Okay.
I don't know that that's enough information to make any connection whatsoever to her being his mistress, especially because, well, obviously that's what she would pose as.
Yeah.
Because that would keep her undercover. Mm-hmm. And I think that, the fact that she was such a good detective, I think that there still happens to be this sort of stigma that like men and women can't work together without having an affair or something.
Yeah.
Especially if they're working as closely as the two of them worked. Mm-hmm. But in any case, a lot of people use the fact that she's buried in his family plot as an example of the fact that they were having an affair. But so were other detectives. Mm. So she wasn't the only one that got buried with his family. However, I didn't want to get too far into this, but his brother was also in the detective agency and just disliked her a lot. And whenever she would come back from one of these trips, he would like go over every single expense that she wrote down and he would interrogate her about them. And I think he might have been the one who started the rumor that they were having an affair. And so
sounds like he was resentful of her.
I think so.
Yeah.
He definitely didn't want women working there.
Oh yeah. And so, the fact that his brother's like so welcoming of it probably pissed him off.
Yeah. So I can't tell if he was just trying to get back at her and like make her reputation bad, or if it was like he had knowledge of it. It could go either way. So Pinkerton had kept very extensive records of his agency and their work, and they had multiple branches, but the one that had like the home base was Chicago. But so all of these really meticulous records, almost all of them were destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, which is a few years after Kate's death. So what we know now of her life and work has been pieced together using what was left after the fire, which all of those records are now in the Library of Congress.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so you can actually go and look at them. And then Alan Pinkerton's memoir that he wrote about his life and his work. So Alan showed a great deal of respect for Kate, and he did not shy away from talking about her achievements in his memoir. And I just want to tell a little bit about what he said about her.
Okay.
He remembered her as, quote, a commanding person with clear-cut, expressive features. She was slender, graceful in her movements, and perfectly self-possessed, with eyes filled with fire.
Ooh.
He said that she wasn't necessarily beautiful, but that her face was very honest, and so lots of people trusted her innately based on how she looked. As Alan became more confident in her abilities and grew the agency to include the Bureau of Women Detectives, he was also sure to impress upon any new woman that he hired how good Kate was at her job. So I wanted to show a clip from a YouTube show that I found called The History Guy, which is really cute and fun. And he described what Alan would say to prospective female detectives.
When Alan Pinkerton would interview prospective female detectives, he would say this to them: "In my service, you will serve your country better than on the field. I have several female operatives. If you choose to come on board, you will train with the head of my female detectives. Kate Warne. She has never let me down.
That's really cool.
Last, I just want to share this last quote. It was written on March 19th, 1868 in the Democratic Inquirer, which is a newspaper in Ohio. And they had done a profile on her. So this is like 3 months after she died. And this is what they said about her legacy. Up to the time of her death, Kate Warne's whole life had been devoted to the service into which she had entered in her younger years. She was undoubtedly the best female detective in America, if not the world.
That's really cool.
Yeah. What do you think?
That's really cool. I had no idea about all of this. And like the threads that play in like politics and it's crazy.
There's a lot. And, you know, she was basically, we only have 15 years of her life, 12 years of her life.
Yeah.
That we know about. And we were able to at least piece together just that much of it. And a lot of people speculate that perhaps Kate Warne wasn't her real name to begin with. And the reason why we don't know anything about her early life is because she wanted it that way.
Name? Ah, that's really cool.
Perfect for a spy, right?
Right? Yeah.
If no one ever knows who you are, they can't ever find out the truth. So I did use Wikipedia. I also used an article on mental floss called The Story of Kate Warne, America's First Female Private Detective by Jake Rawson. Pinkerton Spy, Feminist Icon by Niall Capello at crimereads.com. Celebrating Women's History, America's First Female PI by Erin Allen on the Library of Congress's blog. The Woman Who Helped Stop an Early Attempt on Abraham Lincoln's Life by Erin Blakemore at Time Magazine. First in their field, Kate Warne from the Women's Museum of California, and Kate Warne, America's First Female Detective, and the Pinkerton Agency, which was the clip I played from the History Guy on YouTube. I highly recommend his channel. It's really fun, actually. He wears a little bow tie. He's got like a John Green vibe going.
We had some fun ladies today.
I know. And we also brought on some 2 YouTube shows that people can watch. So check out Raw Craft with Anthony Bourdain and the History Guy on YouTube. Very fun stuff.
I enjoyed it.
I did too.
And take naked selfies and send them to your friends.
That's right. Naked selfies for everyone. Just not to your lovers, only friends. Well, we hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And make sure you're following us on all of our social media stuff so you can keep up on our newest information. And we post really cool photos every week of the stuff that our women do. And we often will share other articles. We're also always open to sharing stuff that you have to say. Like if you have something, like you saw an article or an artist or somebody did something cool, share it to our page or send us an email and we'll boost it in our social media. So if you're interested in following us, you can just scroll down to the episode notes and you'll find all of our information for Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We want to thank our editor,
Lucas McIntyre.
Thank you for everything you do for us and making us sound good. We've gotten good compliments lately on that.
We have, actually.
And we also want to thank Jennifer Finch
from L7
for allowing us to use our amazing theme song, Shirley, from the album Hungry for Stink.
Keep listening, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.